My boss promised me a promotion for months, then gave it to his nephew. Prove yourself, he smirked. Today he begged to save my job. I never imagined I'd be writing this post. 6 months ago, I was their golden boy, the top performer who never complained. Today I'm packing my desk while the entire office watches, and my boss, the same man who humiliated me in front of everyone, is desperately trying to keep me from walking out the door. Life comes at you fast, I guess. Let me start from the beginning, because this story has more twists than I ever could have anticipated, and I'm still processing everything that's happened. I've been working at Meridian Consulting for almost 5 years. It's a mid-sized firm that handles mostly corporate accounts, nothing too exciting, but the pay was decent and the culture was tolerable. At least, that's what I thought until recently. I'd worked my way up from an entry-level position to senior consultant through pure hard work. No connections, no favors, just showing up early, staying late, and delivering results that even our toughest clients praised. My boss, let's call him Richard, because he is one, has been running our department for about 7 years. He's one of those managers who presents himself as everyone's buddy while simultaneously creating a culture of fear. Always cracking jokes in meetings but then tearing people apart in private. Classic corporate psychopath stuff. But I'd managed to stay on his good side by making him look good to the higher-ups. For the past year, our department's associate director position had been empty. Richard had been telling me for months that I was being groomed for the role. Just keep doing what you're doing, Mark. The position is practically yours, he'd say during our one-on-ones. I believed him because, why wouldn't I? I was handling half the responsibilities already without the title or pay bump. I put in 60-hour weeks. I canceled vacations. I missed my sister's wedding because we had a client emergency that only I could handle. My girlfriend Sarah eventually broke up with me because I was never present, even when I was physically there. You're married to that job, she said as she packed the last of her things from our apartment. I didn't fight hard enough to keep her because, in my mind, this promotion was going to make everything worth it. Then 3 months ago, during a company happy hour, Richard introduced everyone to his nephew, Jake. Fresh out of college with a business degree from some state school I'd never heard of. No real experience except for a summer internship at his dad's friend's company. Richard brought him on as a special projects consultant, a position that didn't exist until Jake needed a job. I didn't think much of it at first. New people come and go all the time, and I was focused on wrapping up a major project that would seal the deal on my promotion. The client was Westridge Financial, a company that could potentially triple our business if we impressed them. I'd been working on their account for months, building relationships with their team, learning their systems, putting together a comprehensive strategy that would save them millions. The presentation was scheduled for a Monday morning. The Friday before, Richard called me into his office. "Mark, I've been thinking about the Westridge presentation," he said, leaning back in his chair with that fake smile he uses when he's about to say something awful. "I think Jake should take the lead." I thought he was joking. Jake? He's been here for what, 6 weeks? He doesn't know anything about Westridge. He's got fresh ideas, Mark. And honestly, his presentation skills are more polished than yours. No offense, Richard said, as if adding no offense somehow made it better. But I've been working with Westridge for months. I've built the entire strategy. Their team knows me, trusts me. Richard shrugged. You'll still be there. You can answer technical questions if they come up. But Jake will be the face of the presentation. I wanted to argue more, but years of corporate conditioning had taught me to swallow my pride. Fine, I said. I'll brief him on everything this weekend. And I did. I spent my entire weekend bringing Jake up to speed, sending him all my notes, walking him through the slides, coaching him on the key points. He barely paid attention, scrolling through his phone half the time. "Don't worry so much, dude," he kept saying. "It'll be fine." The presentation was not fine. Jake stumbled through it, mispronouncing the client's names, getting key facts wrong, unable to answer basic questions about the strategy I'd developed. I tried to jump in several times to salvage things, but Richard kept cutting me off, saying, "Let Jake handle this, Mark." By the end, the Westridge team looked confused and annoyed. Their CFO, who had been my main contact, pulled me aside afterward. "What happened, Mark? This isn't what we discussed at all." "I know, I'm sorry," was all I could say. What else could I tell him? That my boss had sabotaged months of work to give his nephew some experience? Later that day, Richard called an emergency department meeting. I thought for sure he was going to address the disaster and possibly apologize to the team for the potential loss of a major client. Instead, he had an announcement. "As you all know, we've been looking to fill our associate director position for some time now, he began, and my heart started racing. Despite the Westridge fiasco, maybe he'd realized he needed to put a competent person in charge. Maybe this was still happening. I'm pleased to announce that after careful consideration, Jake will be stepping into the role, effective immediately. The room went silent. Everyone's eyes darted between Jake, who was grinning like he'd just won the lottery, Richard, who was beaming with pride, and me, who must have looked like I'd been punched in the stomach. But Jake just started, someone whispered. Richard continued as if he hadn't heard. Jake brings a fresh perspective and energy that we need right now. I'm confident he'll lead this department to new heights. Then he looked directly at me with a smirk that I'll never forget. Mark, I know you were hoping for this position, but you need to prove yourself a bit more. Show us you can be a team player. Maybe next time. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for my reaction. 5 years of work, countless sacrifices, and endless promises had led to this moment of public humiliation. I felt my face burning, but I managed to nod and mutter congratulations to Jake before excusing myself to the bathroom, where I locked myself in a stall and tried not to have a complete breakdown. When I returned to my desk, I had an email from the Westridge CFO. They were going in a different direction and would not be moving forward with our firm. All that work, gone. And now I'd be reporting to Jake, who had just cost us a major client. That night, I went home and really looked at my life for the first time in years. My apartment was practically empty since Sarah left. I had no social life to speak of. I'd missed family events and lost touch with friends, all for a company that had just shown exactly how much they valued me. I started updating my resume that night. Not out of anger or revenge, but from a sudden clarity that I needed to get out of there. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew I couldn't stay. The next few weeks were surreal. Jake settled into his new role by delegating most of his actual work to the rest of us while taking 2-hour lunches with Richard. He had no idea how anything in our department worked but was quick to take credit for any successes while blaming others, mostly me, for any problems. I kept my head down and did my job while quietly putting out feelers in my network. I reconnected with former colleagues who had moved on to other companies. I updated my LinkedIn profile and started taking calls from recruiters I would have ignored before. One of those calls was from Dana, a former client who now worked at Action Partners, our biggest competitor. "I always thought you were wasted at Meridian," she said. "We have a director position open that would be perfect for you." The interview process with Action moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, I had an offer for the director role, 2 levels above my current position, with a 40% salary increase and a much better benefits package. I didn't hesitate to accept. I planned to give my 2 weeks' notice the following Monday, but something happened that changed everything. On Friday afternoon, Richard called another department meeting. His face was grim. "I have some difficult news," he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "Westridge Financial has filed a formal complaint with our executive team regarding their recent experience with us. They've also spoken to several of our other clients." He paused, looking around the room. "We're at risk of losing 5 major accounts." Everyone started whispering. Those 5 clients represented almost 40% of our department's revenue. This was a potential catastrophe. "I need everyone to focus on damage control," Richard continued. "Mark, since you have the strongest relationship with Westridge, I need you to reach out to them and see if you can salvage things." I almost laughed out loud at the audacity. He had deliberately pushed me out of the Westridge presentation, given my promotion to his nephew, and now wanted me to clean up their mess. "Actually, Richard," I said calmly, "I've accepted a position at another company. I was planning to give my notice on Monday, but since we're all here, I might as well do it now." The room went completely silent. Richard's face went from shock to anger to something like panic in the span of seconds. "You can't leave right now. We're in crisis mode." "My start date is in 3 weeks," I replied. "I'm happy to work my notice period and help with transition documentation." "We need to discuss this in private," Richard said, abruptly ending the meeting. In his office, he oscillated between threatening and begging. First, he reminded me of my non-compete clause, which was practically unenforceable in our state. Then he offered me a raise, less than what Action was paying. Finally, he suggested that Jake's promotion was just a trial and that things could change in the future. "Things have already changed," I told him. "I've accepted another position. A director role, actually." "Director?" He looked genuinely surprised, as if he couldn't imagine me at that level. "Where?" "Action Partners." His face went pale. "You can't go to Action. You know too much about our clients, our strategies." I simply shrugged. "I don't make the rules, Richard. You've always told us that business is business. Over the weekend, my phone blew up with texts and calls from colleagues who had heard the news. Many were supportive, some were jealous, and a few admitted they were also looking for ways out. Jake sent a particularly amusing message: "Not cool to abandon the team like this, man. Real professionals stick it out." I didn't bother responding. Instead, I spent the weekend cleaning my apartment, calling family members I'd neglected, and even reached out to Sarah. We weren't getting back together, but it felt good to apologize properly for how absent I'd been during our relationship. Monday morning was strange. People kept stopping by my desk, some to congratulate me, others just curious about how things had gone down with Richard. I focused on documenting my projects and preparing transition notes. I was determined to leave professionally, regardless of how I'd been treated. Around lunchtime, I was called to a meeting with Richard and Lauren from HR. This wasn't unexpected, standard exit interview stuff, I assumed. But when I arrived, the company's CEO, Thomas, was also there. I had only spoken to him a handful of times in my 5 years. "Mark," Thomas began, "Richard has filled me in on your situation. I understand you've accepted a position at Action." "That's correct," I replied, wondering where this was going. "Before you make a final decision, I'd like to make a counteroffer. We're prepared to match Action's salary and promote you to Associate Director immediately. Richard and Jake would co-lead the department during a transition period, after which we would reevaluate the structure." I was genuinely surprised. The CEO getting involved in a non-executive's departure was unusual. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but my decision isn't just about the title or compensation. It's about trust and how I've been treated here." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, and frankly, I'm concerned about what I'm hearing. This situation with Westridge and other clients is serious. Richard tells me you're the only one who might be able to repair those relationships." Richard, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "Mark, I know I made a mistake with Jake's promotion. I was trying to help family, but I see now that it was unfair to you and damaging to the department. I'm asking you to help us fix this." It was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get from him, but it was too little, too late. The desperation in his voice gave me no satisfaction, just confirmation that I was making the right decision by leaving. "Again, I appreciate the offer," I repeated. "But I've given my word to Action, and I intend to honor that commitment. I'm happy to do everything I can during my notice period to help with the transition and document my client relationships." Thomas sighed but nodded respectfully. "I understand. Integrity is important, and we should have valued yours more highly before now. If you change your mind in the next few days, this offer remains open." As the meeting ended and I turned to leave, Richard grabbed my arm. "You're making a huge mistake," he hissed, his earlier contrition evaporating. "I made your career here, and I can break it elsewhere." I gently removed his hand from my arm. "No, Richard, you didn't make my career. I did. And you didn't break it either. You actually helped me see what I'm really worth." The next 2 weeks were a strange mix of relief, anxiety about my new job, and watching the slow-motion car crash that was our department under Jake's leadership. 2 more clients formally requested to be transferred to other account managers after disastrous meetings with him. Richard was spending more and more time in closed-door meetings with the executive team, emerging looking increasingly stressed. Jake, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the chaos he was causing. He continued taking long lunches, making dismissive comments about legacy clients we were better off without, and treating the administrative staff like his personal assistants. 3 days before my last day, the other shoe dropped. Thomas called another department meeting, this time with the entire executive team present. His face was grave as he addressed us. "After careful consideration of recent events and client feedback, we've decided to make some changes to the department structure," he announced. "Effective immediately, Richard will be moving to an advisory role within the company, and Jake's position is being eliminated." The room erupted in whispers. Richard sat stone-faced in the corner, while Jake looked like he might either cry or punch someone. Additionally, Thomas continued once the noise died down, "We'll be restructuring the department to better serve our clients. Mark, I know you're leaving us soon, but I'd like to formally apologize for how your contributions were overlooked. You represented the kind of leadership we should have been promoting all along." It was a vindicating moment, but not a particularly satisfying one. The damage had been done, to the department, to client relationships, and to my own trust in the company. I felt bad for my colleagues who would have to deal with the fallout, but I knew I'd made the right decision to leave. After the meeting, several colleagues came to my desk to express their shock and ask what I thought would happen next. I didn't have answers for them, only encouragement to look out for themselves as the company went through these changes. Jake cleared out his desk that same day, not bothering to say goodbye to anyone. Richard was notably absent, apparently taking some personal time before transitioning to his new role, which everyone understood was essentially a demotion without the embarrassment of a title change. On my final day, I finished transferring my files, handed over my security badge, and said my goodbyes. Thomas personally came down to shake my hand and reiterate that the door was always open if I ever wanted to return. I thanked him but knew I wouldn't be coming back. As I walked out of the building for the last time, I felt lighter than I had in years. The experience had been painful but clarifying. I'd learned that loyalty should be to myself and my own values first, that no company is worth sacrificing my personal life for, and that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's moving on to something better. Update, 1 month later. I've been at Action for 4 weeks now, and the difference in culture is night and day. My ideas are valued, my experience respected, and the work-life balance is actually real, not just a talking point in the company handbook. I leave the office by 5:30 most days, and no one gives me side-eye for it. Last week, I ran into Dana for coffee, and she mentioned something interesting. "Did you hear what happened at Meridian after you left?" she asked with a smirk. Apparently, after my departure, 3 more senior consultants resigned within 2 weeks. The department was in such disarray that they had to bring in an outside consulting firm, ironically, to help reorganize. Richard's advisory role lasted all of 3 weeks before he was let go completely. Jake, through family connections, landed at another firm but was put on probation after just 2 weeks for performance issues. But the most surprising news was about the Westridge account. After I left, Thomas himself reached out to their CFO to try to salvage the relationship. During that conversation, the CFO apparently said, "The only reason we worked with Meridian in the first place was because of Mark. If he had presented that day as planned, we'd still be your client." Dana also told me that Meridian had reached out to several former employees, offering significant raises and promotions to come back and help stabilize things. None had accepted so far. I could have felt smug about this news, but honestly, I just felt sad for my former colleagues who were still trying to keep things afloat there. I wished them well but couldn't help feeling relieved that I was out of that situation. On a personal note, I've started reconnecting with old friends and even joined a recreational soccer league, something I'd wanted to do for years but never had the time for. I've been on a few dates, nothing serious yet, but it feels good to be present in my own life again. Sarah and I have had a few more conversations. She's seeing someone new, and I'm genuinely happy for her. We've managed to salvage a friendship from the wreckage of our relationship, which feels like a small victory in itself. Several people have asked if I feel vindicated by what happened at Meridian after I left. The honest answer is that I stopped caring about vindication the moment I walked out that door. Success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about finding what's right for you. Update, 6 months later. Life has a funny way of coming full circle sometimes. Yesterday, I had a meeting with a potential new client for Action. As I walked into the conference room, I found myself face to face with the Westridge CFO, along with several other executives I'd worked with during my time at Meridian. "Mark," he exclaimed, standing to shake my hand. When they said Action was sending their director of corporate strategies, I had no idea it would be you. The meeting went extraordinarily well. Not only did Westridge sign with us, but they introduced us to 2 other companies in their network who were unhappy with their current consultants, one of whom was still with Meridian. After the meeting, the CFO asked if I had time for a drink. Over whiskeys, he filled me in on what he knew about Meridian's continuing struggles. After losing several major clients and key staff, they were now in talks to be acquired by a larger firm, at a significantly reduced valuation. Richard had apparently been telling people around town that the company's downfall was due to my sabotage in leaving and stealing clients, which gave us both a good laugh. "Some people never learn," the CFO said, shaking his head. "It was never about you or Jake or anyone specific. It was about respect, competence, and keeping promises." Richard broke all 3. I couldn't have said it better myself. On the home front, things continue to improve. I've been seeing someone for about 2 months now, a kindergarten teacher named Emma who couldn't care less about corporate politics and regularly reminds me that there's a whole world outside of work. Last weekend, we went hiking and I realized I hadn't checked my email in 2 days. That small thing felt like a massive personal victory. I still get LinkedIn messages from former Meridian colleagues, some asking for job recommendations, others just checking in. I help when I can because I remember what it was like to be in that environment. A few have successfully moved on to better situations, and their relief is palpable even through text messages. Jake reached out once, asking if I could put in a good word for him at Action. The audacity was almost admirable. I responded politely that I wasn't involved in hiring for his area of expertise, which was true, but also a kind way of saying not a chance in hell. According to mutual connections, he's now working at his father's company in an executive development program created specifically for him. As for Richard, I heard through the grapevine that he's been struggling to find another management position and has been doing independent consulting work, though without the strong client relationships he relied on at Meridian, he's finding it difficult to gain traction. Part of me feels bad for him, but another part recognizes that accountability sometimes comes in the form of natural consequences. Thomas, surprisingly, connected with me on LinkedIn and sent a thoughtful message acknowledging that the company had failed to recognize and appreciate talent that was right in front of them. He's now leading the transition team for Meridian's acquisition and seems genuinely committed to learning from past mistakes. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's not about karma or revenge or even justice. It's about understanding your own worth and not letting others define it for you. It's about recognizing that loyalty should be reciprocal, and when it's not, you have every right to take your talents elsewhere. And it's about realizing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight back against mistreatment, but to simply remove yourself from the equation and find somewhere your contributions are valued. For those reading who might be in similar situations, know that the fear of leaving what's familiar is often worse than the reality of starting somewhere new. The temporary discomfort of change is usually worth the potential for growth and happiness on the other side. And remember, the best revenge isn't about hurting others, it's about healing yourself and creating a life where those who dimmed your light become increasingly irrelevant to your story. Update, 1 year later. I didn't expect to be updating this post again, but something happened last week that brought this whole saga full circle in a way I never could have anticipated. Action has been doing incredibly well over the past year. We've expanded our client base by 40%, opened a new office in Chicago, and I was recently promoted to senior director with an equity stake in the company. The work remains challenging but fulfilling, and I've maintained reasonable hours despite the increased responsibilities. Last Tuesday, I was representing Action at a major industry conference. After my panel discussion on corporate restructuring strategies, ironic, I know, a man approached me in the hotel lobby. It took me a moment to recognize him without the expensive suit and confident demeanor, but it was Richard. He looked different, older, somehow less substantial. His handshake wasn't the bone-crushing power move I remembered. "Got time for a coffee?" he asked, with none of his usual bravado. Curiosity got the better of me, and 20 minutes later we were sitting in the hotel restaurant, an awkward silence between us. "Meridian's gone," he finally said, staring into his coffee. "The acquisition finalized last month. They kept less than 30% of the staff." I already knew this from former colleagues but nodded anyway. "I heard. I'm sorry for everyone affected." He gave a humorless laugh. "After everything, you're still being diplomatic." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I've had a lot of time to think about what happened. Too much time, actually. Been doing independent consulting, but it's not going well." I wasn't sure what to say, so I just listened. "You know what kills me?" he continued. "I was so focused on helping Jake that I couldn't see I was destroying something that took years to build. Not just the department or client relationships, but trust. Once that's gone." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked. Richard looked up at me directly for the first time. "Because I owe you an apology. A real one, not that bullshit I tried when we were desperate to keep you. What I did was wrong on every level." To say I was shocked would be an understatement. In 5 years of working with Richard, I'd never once heard him admit fault without immediately deflecting blame elsewhere. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But I'm not sure what you want from me now." He pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. "I don't expect anything. But I'm trying to rebuild myself, my career, my reputation. If you ever hear of someone who needs my expertise, I'd be grateful for the recommendation. No pressure, no expectations." The card was simple, just his name and contact information. No fancy title, no company affiliation. "I'll keep it in mind," I said, pocketing the card more out of politeness than intention. We chatted a bit more about industry changes and mutual acquaintances before parting ways. As he was leaving, he turned back. "You know, Jake's not in the industry anymore. Working at his uncle's car dealership in Ohio." "Good for him," I said, and meant it. Some people aren't cut out for corporate life, and that's okay. "And Mark?" Richard added. For what it's worth, Thomas was right that day. "You were always the kind of leader we should have been promoting." I was just too insecure to see it. With that, he walked away, shoulders slightly stooped, looking nothing like the intimidating figure who had once held such power over my career and self-worth. Walking back to my room, I felt a strange mixture of emotions, vindication, yes, but also a kind of sadness for the wasted potential and unnecessary damage caused by ego and poor leadership. I thought about how many talented people had their careers derailed or delayed because of managers like Richard, and how many companies suffered the consequences of promoting the wrong people for the wrong reasons. That evening, I had dinner with Emma, who had flown in to join me for the weekend after the conference. We've been living together for 4 months now, and things are getting serious in the best possible way. As I told her about my encounter with Richard, she asked a question that made me stop and think. "Do you forgive him?" I considered it carefully. "I think I do," I finally answered. "Not for his sake, but for mine. Holding on to that anger wasn't serving me anymore." "Are you going to help him?" she pressed. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me thinks he deserves a chance to redeem himself. Another part wonders if I'd be doing a disservice to whoever I recommended him to." Emma, with her kindergarten teacher wisdom, said something simple but profound: "People can change when the cost of not changing becomes too high." Sounds like he hit that point. 2 days later, I got a call from Dana about a short-term project that needed someone with Richard's specific experience with financial services. After some consideration, I sent his information along with an honest assessment of both his expertise and our history. "He knows this sector inside out," I wrote, "and I believe he's genuinely committed to rebuilding his professional reputation the right way. Whether anything comes of it, I don't know, but it felt like the right thing to do, not out of obligation or pity, but because everyone deserves the opportunity to learn and grow from their mistakes. Even Richard." As for me, this chapter of my professional life has taught me more than I ever expected. I learned that sometimes the worst professional experiences lead to the best outcomes. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't always about confrontation, sometimes it's simply about walking away with your dignity intact. And I learned that success isn't defined by titles or salaries, but by creating a life where work enhances rather than diminishes your humanity. To everyone who followed this story and shared their own similar experiences in the comments, thank you. Your support and insights helped me process everything that happened and see it from perspectives I might have missed on my own. And to those currently stuck in toxic work environments who've messaged me privately asking for advice, trust your instincts, know your worth, and remember that no job is worth sacrificing your well-being. The best revenge against those who undervalue you isn't to prove them wrong, it's to find people who recognize your worth from the beginning. And sometimes, as in my case, that revenge might eventually include extending grace to those who wronged you, not because they deserve it, but because you've moved so far beyond that chapter that you can afford to be generous. Life's too short for grudges, especially when you're too busy thriving to maintain them.